So about 6 months ago was when I made a decision that I was going to sell my red Komodo X in order to get the Pyxis, which started a little bit of an uproar, but there's a silver lining here, because I did get an interesting email. Right around the time of NAB when the Pyxis was announced, Cooke Optics reached out and wanted me to test their SP3's for the L-mount system. Now, being all ready to go, it did take a little bit of time because, well, the Pyxis took a little bit of time. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the full set of the Cooke SP3's for the L-mount system. Essentially, all the optical things you've probably already heard before are pretty much the same, but I wanted to test it out on the Blackmagic Pyxis to see what footage that I can get. And as far as disclosures go, just so you guys know, Cooke did not sponsor this video. In fact, I'm wearing a DZO film hat. However, the sponsor of this video is going to be Artlist, because they have a ton of features that I use on a daily basis, and one that's particularly interesting. But, well, we'll get there. Now, currently the Cooke SP3's is a 5-lens kit, but they just released their 18mm. I got to test out the 25, the 32, the 50, the 75, and the 100. And relative to other Cooke lenses, they've made them a little bit more affordable than something like an S4. And they've also managed to make these lenses way smaller than using some of the bigger Cooke optic lenses that are already available. Like, check this out for a second. This is the 50mm T2.4 SP3, and it fits pretty much in the palm of my hand. It's a very, very small lens. However, it does pack a punch, and it does also have a pretty price tag, which, after using this for a month, I think it's kind of worth it. On top of that, let me just show you what it looks like when it's on the Pyxis. So this is the Pyxis with the Cooke SP3 on it. It's a very, very small package, and I got this new Ursa handle, which makes it a little bit more compactable. I don't know if compactable is a word. So these lenses did come out for Sony E-mount, and they were a full frame coverage, which is exactly the same being L-mount. These also match some of the other Cooke offerings as well, which I didn't get to test in this video. However, I'll take the word for it that these are going to match up with other Cooke lenses that are available. Now, across the board, these lenses are going to be a T2.4, which isn't necessarily the best low light lens in the world. However, for the optics you're going to get at the T2.4 and the size of the lens, I think there is a little bit of a sacrifice on speed to make sure that the physical speed being smaller is a little bit easier. So just for some context, I wanted to find out what the Cooke SP3's look like in comparison to a lens that's often compared to Cooke lenses, which is going to be the DZO Vespid Prime. Now, right now we're looking at the 25mm Cooke SP3, and from looking at my monitor, this is actually kind of nice. Now, I am using a Nisi True Color filter because it's going to give me the most accurate color out of there, and I still need an ND filter because the Pyxis doesn't have any. But something I noticed, and you're probably going to notice across this video, is all of the brighter areas look kind of bloomy. It feels kind of like there is a little bit of a lift on here, like there's maybe a bit of pro mist, but also like a little bluish tint that's in some of these images. I've been using these for a little bit, and I found that even trying it with and without a filter on it, it does have kind of a unique look. This is probably what happens when you use more expensive cinema lenses, that you get something a little bit more unique, and it has a kind of style to it, if I was to say anything. I also want to make a point over here as well that you're going to notice about some of the flaring, and I know some people, i.e. Kamaki, don't like when I do this, but this is kind of what the flare looks like when I put a little light in front of it. Now, if I go up a lot closer, you're going to notice this is going to flare like quite a bit. But overall, this is how the Cooke SP3 looks like at the 25mm lens. All of them are probably going to match. I don't want to go through every single focal length and take too long, but this is how it looks. Now, this is the DZO Vespid Prime. This is the 25mm, and the sun's kind of moved like a little bit, but overall, you're going to notice a different look between these two lenses. I find that this one looks a little bit on the warmer side, a little bit yellow, and sometimes if there's green in the frame, it makes it a little bit more pronounced. But looking at this, both of these are kind of preferential looks. I do like the kind of charm you get from the SP3's, and I think that kind of goes with the price tag. And the DZO Vespid Primes, albeit are comparable, I guess, to the Cookes. I don't know if I totally believe that, but you're going to get something that looks nice either way. I do think that the Cookes have a little bit more bloom to the highlights to them, and I do think it's a little bit easier on the skin. However, the DZO Vespid Primes are no slouch. Most of the things that I've shot on darker skin tones have been on DZO lenses, and they've all looked pretty good, especially when paired with the Blackmagic Pyxis. So if you are looking at a side-by-side of these two looks, this is kind of how it looks. Now, I'm going to also turn this guy on. Again, I know people hate when, I think just Cam hates when I do this, but this is kind of what the flaring looks like. I'm going to move a little bit closer to it, kind of see if that changes anything. It probably doesn't, but instead of me trying to tell you which one you should prefer, you just let me know in the comments which ones you like a little bit better. Keep in mind that the Cooke SP3's are about $4,500 per lens, where the DZO Vespid Primes are like a quarter of that. Now, it goes without saying that these lenses are cinema lenses, which means it's going to be manual focus. If you're hoping for autofocus, you're not going to get it here, except if you use a DJI Focus Pro, which we did use on a shoot, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Now, because they're smaller lenses, and I believe they're being used for things like gimbal use and solo operators to be able to pull from the barrel on their own, or use smaller focus motoring systems, the throw isn't that long. Traditionally, some of the lenses I've had 270 degrees at 300 degree focus throws. This one feels a little bit shorter, which makes it a lot easier, especially if you're going to pull focus from the barrel. And with using such a small lens, actually makes the process a bit easier. Now, with cinema lenses in general, usually they're going to be a matching set, not only from the optics, but also the size of the lenses in case you have to switch between things like gimbals or other systems where you just want to keep the lenses being the same size. Now, for the most part, they are pretty much the same size, but there's one thing that I always mention in every lens video, but it's a little bit different here. It might be something that you might not like, but at the same time, honestly, when you see some of the images on this lens, I might be able to give some things up. And it's going to be the front-facing filter thread. Give me a second, let me explain. So right in front of me here, I have the 25mm t2.4, and I also have the 100mm as well. If you look at both of these, you're going to notice which one is not like the other. This guy does have a 77 front filter thread if you want to put screw-on NDs on it, where this one is 58mm, which is a lot smaller, in fact too small for some of the matte boxes that I have that use adapter rings to go on the front of your glass. Working with the Pyxis, I didn't have access to a built-in ND filter. Now if you're someone using something that has built-in NDs, which I don't actually know which L-mount camera has that. Maybe the Ursa 12K. Either way, this is going to be a little bit too small to put on matte boxes, but it does make sense for the form factor to be smaller that you can use screw-on NDs. I use my Nisi True Color there because it has the least amount of color cast out of the ND filters that I had, and it works pretty well when you use a step-up ring. In fact, I'll show you one that might work a bit better. Now, these are pretty easy to find. I'm pretty sure any company makes them. You can grab these on Amazon. But this is a 58 to 82mm step-up ring. And it's only like one kind of story or one kind of stop, which makes the process easier because when I was using the SP3's on a shoot that I was working on, I didn't have one of these, and I kind of had a stupid-looking like space between where the front of the filter is and where the Cooke lens started. So get yourself one of these if you are going to rent or even buy this kit yourself. Overall, you've probably heard enough from me. You want to see the work. You want to see the footage. You want to see what it looks like in the wild. I don't have a big production shoot or a narrative film to show you, but I do have one thing. So let's talk about a production application. A couple of weeks ago, I did take a trip to Buffalo to shoot with Keon Coleman from the Buffalo Bills. I was working with a supplement company client. We needed to make a very quick ad, but we also had not a lot of time in order to shoot this. Now, if I was working with some bigger lenses and having to do lens changes, or maybe even working with the bigger Cooke lenses, which I wish, this might have been a little bit more than we can chew in terms of switching out lenses and then just the heaviness of the rig, where it might have made things a little bit slower, especially because we only had an hour and 45 minutes to shoot this commercial. I'm going to talk about that in a later video. Now, where the SP3's could shine is not only the size and the weight, but also that it could hook up to the DJI Focus Pro. Now, if you haven't taken a look at one of these lenses more closely, it still has those grooves on the focus wheel, sort of like other cinema lenses might have, which makes it easier to hook up to the Focus Pro motor, and as well, if you take a little bit of time in your camera prep or before you even start shooting, you can calibrate these lenses to give it autofocus, which helps out a lot, especially in sports type shoots. For some of the shots that I was doing during this commercial, I just used the Focus Pro to make my life a little bit easier, while my Pyxis rig was set up on an easy rig. Now, for some of the shots where we need to get some tracking shots of Keon running downfield, it's a little bit outside of the range of the Focus Pro. I actually hired on Tom Shaw to be my one-wheel operator. He drove like 8 hours from Connecticut in order to do this shoot, and it made it a lot easier for him to maneuver on the one wheel, basically going sideways while operating the camera at the same time, while I pulled focus, and if I had a bigger lens or if it was an awkwardly balanced kit, using a one wheel might have not only not got us a shot, but it would have been a little bit dangerous. Now, for the most part in this video, a lot of the shots that I got were outdoor exteriors, which means that the sun is going to be a factor. I didn't shoot a lot in low light as I didn't really have a lot of low light projects that were going on, but one thing you're going to notice about the SP3's is that they flare quite a bit. They do have a softer, more creamier look, especially in the out of focus areas. If you take a look at the bokeh in one of the hero shots that we got, the bokeh is actually really interesting. It doesn't look like a photo lens, while at the same time, one of the things you might have to give into or just kind of deal with is the fact that it does have a lot of blooming flares. When you move across the sun or any really bright light source like the sun, you're going to notice that it's going to wash across your frame. Now, this is a more stylistic choice and a look, and I quite like it for some shots actually. But if you're somebody that wants a lens that doesn't flare too much, you might not be looking at one of these guys. However, when you go through some of the image and how the color actually renders and how well it does in skin tones, I'm hit or miss with this guy, to be honest with you. It's not a super clean lens, it's not super clinical, but it does have a really unique look while at the same time remaining not too sharp, but incredibly detailed. Now, if you guys do want to know more about this Keon Coleman shoot, leave a comment down below. I'm working on a BTS to break down some of the things you have to do with a time constraint, some of the lighting we did because a lot of it was more naturalistic lighting, but leave that for me a little bit later. But I want to talk about the fact that we did use the full set of these on that shoot, but I also took it somewhere else. Now, this video is sponsored by Artlist. Now, I have been using Artlist music for the last couple of months. In fact, I've used it for the majority of this year. Not only on this YouTube channel, but I've also used it for some client projects. And one thing that I like is that you have an unlimited license. So if you are working with clients where it's going to go onto Facebook ads or Google ads, which I work in quite a bit, you don't have to worry about any sort of trouble while using Artlist as your copyright-free music option. I've already talked about the things like voice over AI, which I've used as a starting point to help with voiceovers for certain projects, some personal and some even for some of my clients as well. One thing that they brought into Artlist, because it kind of feels like they're bringing new features almost every single couple of months, they have LUTs now. Now, LUTs are meant to also be a starting point. Just like voiceover AI is meant to help you and give you direction in terms of your voiceover, LUTs are meant to be a starting point for color grading your footage. Now, I did try some of these LUTs on top of my Pyxis footage while converting it to Rec 709, as all of these are finishing LUTs rather than conversion LUTs. So if you don't see a particular camera's log or anything on there, convert your log footage to Rec 709 and then put that LUT on top and make adjustments from there. Now, there are a ton of different LUTs that are going to be on the Artlist website. You could try a whole bunch of them and find out which works for your footage. This is something where I can get some experimentation. I could tweak a couple of clips in order to get a quick color grade in a fly. I use my own LUTs, but it's always nice to have more options. And Artlist gives that to you in their LUT pack, which is now on their website, along with their music, their voiceover AI, and some of the other tools that you can make to make your editing life a little bit easier. I'll leave a link in the description down below, probably one on the screen, and let's get back into the video because we still have to figure out what the heck the Cooke is. Now, taking this out of the context of maybe using it on a high-end narrative film or a really high-end commercial, because Cooke lenses are synonymous with bigger production. Unfortunately, it's a little bit slower this year, and I only had the short commercial that I shot recently, so I took it to Moab, Utah, in order to get more exterior shots. Now, with the size of this lens and compactness of it, and also paired with the size of the Pyxis, I think this is a really good pairing. Now, keep in mind, you're gonna have to pay the cost to be the boss here, but in terms of the color rendition, the highlight roll-off, and that unique blue tint that I find in the image on this guy, this is a different look that I'm not quite used to, but one that I could never complain about. It did kind of feel like I was using a Pro Mist filter throughout shooting through the desert, because everything seemed to bloom and have a really nice roll-off, while at the same time all of the colors were a little bit more on the punchier side. Things weren't super faded, and it was easy to grade, especially when paired with the Blackmagic Raw coming out of the Pyxis. Overall, using this in a run and gun situation like traveling through the desert, I think this is a very unique look. Again, they're not going to be cheap lenses, and I don't think Cooke ever set out to be, but making a lens that's smaller, more compact for solo shooters to kind of do this run and gun style of work was something I found advantageous, and at the same time, I'm not working on a gigantic film set right now, or I don't think I will for the rest of the year, so hopefully you guys enjoyed some of this footage. Now, we spent the last week in Moab, and I took the SP3's, the 25, the 50, the 100mm, mostly because if I talked only about the production that I recently worked on, I would have just been really upset because that's going to keep me up at night. But I'm going to show you some of the footage that I shot using all three of these lenses because they are pretty tiny, they're compact, and they're kind of made for run and gun filmmaking as long as you have the budget. Now, one thing about the Cooke SP3's is that they're incredibly small. It was easy for me to pack up multiple lenses for my Pyxis rig and to get a lot of footage around during this trip. Now, with a smaller lens, there is kind of one caveat that's maybe not my favorite, but it's an easy fix. And it's the fact that the 58mm filter thread is the largest filter thread you have on the majority of these lenses. Now, there are two lenses in this kit that use 77, but the other four are a 58, which makes it a little bit tougher if you want to get it on things like a matte box or if you want to use step-up rings for an ND filter. And because we're in the middle of the desert, I kind of needed ND the entire time. But if you have a camera that already has built-in NDs, none of this really is important and none of this really applies. All right, so this is what I mean by that filter thread. So this guy, this is a 25mm. It's really small, it's really tiny, compact, and it's great for run and gun shooting, but that would be tough to get out of matte box. Now, what you can do is I've used this 58mm, 82mm step-up ring. So if I do need to put filters on it, kind of like the Nisi one I'm using right now, that's generally how I have this guy set up. That's pretty much carried me throughout this entire trip. Now, kind of weird place to put it, this 100mm, completely different story, because this right here at the front, this little kind of protrusion at the end, this is a 77mm, so you can't put this on a matte box. It's just going to be a little bit harder when you use one of these. Overall, I had a fantastic time testing out the Cooke SP3's over the last 30 days. Now, one of the questions you guys might ask is, are these worth it? Are these worth the purchase of $4,500 a pop or almost $30,000 for the entire set? I'm a little bit conflicted in my opinion on this, guys, and I want you guys to just stay with me for a second. On one end, I do actually think they're worth it, but under the caveat that you probably don't plan on upgrading your lenses within the next like 8 to 10 years. There are certain categories of camera equipment that I would consider the end game, or like things that you would probably buy and then never buy again, because I don't know if I'll have money to buy lenses after spending $30,000 on a set of Cooke SP3's. Now, on the flip side, if you're somebody that's under a budget, if you're used to using something like the DZO Vespid primes, which is kind of where I'm at right now, then it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to buy these as a solo operator, not working with a gigantic team and not working on gigantic projects, because it just might not make its money back. Now, I say that, but I also say you might want to reach out to your local rental shop, because they might have a little bit more capital and a little bit more incentive to buy some of these lenses if they're really popular, even though they're a little bit more expensive. And that's a great situation to actually have, because I would just rent the crap out of them, to be completely honest with you, because the optics out of these Cooke lenses are amazing. They're not necessarily clinically perfect. They bloom a little bit. The color looks amazing. It flares a lot. They do kind of look like DZO Vespid primes, or the other way around, but these look a lot better when it all comes down to it. The highlight roll-off is great. The bokeh, someone actually said, looks kind of anamorphic, even though these are spherical lenses. There's a lot going for these lenses, and Cooke has found a way to make them a lot cheaper than what they normally sell their lenses for, and make them for solo operators, especially if you're working with a big team and you probably don't want to upgrade your lenses for quite a long time. Now, my final verdict on these guys, if you got $30,000 to spend on lenses, go right ahead. I'm not going to stop you, but you probably already know what lenses you want to get if you have that amount of money. But if you're someone working with a smaller budget, maybe just convince your rental shop to buy them so that you could rent them all the time. Or if you want to put that investment down and rent them out yourself, you could totally do that as well. I just don't have $30,000, but that doesn't necessarily mean these are bad lenses. I do think these are some of the most fun I've had with lenses in a really long time. And also paired with the Blackmagic Pyxis, I think it's a really nice pairing. That being said, a special shout out to Artlist for sponsoring this video. They might be the channel sponsor next year, but who knows. If you guys have any lenses you recommend that I try out, especially on the Pyxis, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.